Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's been a while since I've uploaded a video. I have several videos quick videos that I've made that I'm gonna be uploading, but I haven't done much since my tailbone injury back in August at the sortie where I broke my tailbone, my sacrum. And I've been pretty hard up for doing stuff since then. A little update on my personal life. Of course, I got engaged last June. We're working on the marriage. Or the wedding, and getting stuff ready for that. I've been doing good at my new job, working at Case in Benson, building the new Patriot sprayer tractors, making good money doing that. Of course, I'd rather be making money doing all my jet ski stuff, all my Sea-Doo stuff, and this channel. That's kind of a dream. But for now, we're going to do this as a hobby, and I love doing this. Today we're going to be working on this 1996 XP with the 787. We're going to be doing a conversion. Now my wear ring on this is worn, so I've got to replace the wear ring. I got to rebuild the pump. I've already done videos on that, so I'm going to skip that part. But we're going to be converting it from the 96 without the spacer to the old 95 style with the spacer. That will be this spacer here. Makes the pump stick out that much more. And it also makes swapping or changing your pump a lot easier because this seals to the back of the hull with all the silicone. And then your pump just bolts to this with the neoprene seal. So you won't have all the silicone and RTV to replace. So swapping out pumps and changing out pumps is a lot easier on this style. There's a few things you need to do for this conversion, and I will get into that as well as tools needed. But a little history on this 96 XP. This is the first ski I bought. Bought it in, I believe, July 2015. Got it for $1,200 with no trailer, of course. And it's been a good machine. I've done the regular oil lines, gas lines, carb rebuilding. Had to replace the starter. Had to replace the wear ring once when I first got it. So it's been several years on this wear ring. And I think the biggest issue I had with it was the rectifier causing the issues, hitting the rev limiter. And a few broken cables. I think I broke a throttle cable on this once. But for the most part, it's been a good, reliable machine. I rebuilt the ray valves as well. And but we're also going to be swapping this from the carbon seal back to the carrier bearing because I prefer the carrier bearing style. We just put grease in it. But let's get this thing uncovered. It's been sitting in storage all winter. And of course, this is the Leader Accessories cover. Leader Accessories doesn't make these anymore. They don't offer them. But now the same style is available through CoverMate. You can get it at overtons.com. I have a video of that, of their covers, their review of their covers. But you can get this pretty much the exact same thing, except the logo is different. But these are good covers. And I swear if you put the Leader one and the Overtons CoverMate next to each other, you wouldn't know the difference other than the logo. So let's get this thing uncovered and we'll get started. Now I'll do a quick walk around on this ski, show you what all I've done to it as far as accessories and other mods. It's pretty much stock as far as the engine goes, other than rebuilding and replacing those ray valves with new blades, and a few other things. So let's do a walk around. I've got to make new decals, registration decals. These are, they're probably close to 10 years old. I haven't replaced these in a while. But this one's my Punisher. Call it the Punisher. I've always gotten a beating on this thing. But we got new graphic dash here. This was done by Mike Stowe at PWC Graphics. He does the printing. I don't do printing myself for my graphics. With my machine, I just do the cutting. So here we have yellow on black, yellow on black, yellow on black, and just black there. But as you can see, it's gotten a lot of use. It's going to be time for a makeover on this thing soon. We got the ODI lock-on grips with the custom engraved laser etched GC Extreme on them. We've got nice gauges up here, VTS gauge and speedometer gauge. Now this is hooked up to a CAN-Do GPS unit, which is inside the unit, so it's not using the paddle wheel on the back. We've got a black tip. This was one of their premium covers. They no longer offer these premium ones anymore, and they no longer offer it without the black tip logo. So they discontinued this style with this etching, or this, not etching, this sewing, the stitching. Stitching is the word I was looking for. So this was their premium. They don't offer these anymore. I got 2 of them because I bought a second ski before, and I sold that ski without the seat. Of course, I put a different seat on it, so I wanted to keep the premium covers since you can't get them anymore. We've got a rear step ladder helping me get on because let's just say these things are hard to get on. We've got our work sponsons, aftermarket sponsons. So not much on the outside. I did powder coat the nozzle yellow, and we do have these aftermarket trim tabs here, 3-degree trim tabs. And we have our outlet here for our bilge pump installed. And then we have our tiny tack. As you can see, 80 hours and 59 minutes since I've installed that tiny tack. And I believe that's probably the second tiny tack I've bought. I think the first one didn't last but a year or two, and the batteries went dead and it wouldn't start, or it wouldn't turn on. Let's pop this off. You can see our bilge pump is mounted right here on the side. It's hard to see from this angle. Let me grab my flashlight, if I can find it. Grab my Milwaukee flashlight here. There's our bilge pump. And I made a little bracket, it's hard to see, that uses the PTO cover. That way it's easy removable. We got our working VTS with our trim fix mod in it. Ray valves were leaking. Looks like I need a new gasket for that. I've got extra gaskets. Like I said, it's been a few years since they've been rebuilt, so that's par for the course. We don't have a battery in it yet, but as you can see, we've got new gas lines, new oil lines, new temp sensor there. Let's open up the hood. Now, I did replace this one many years ago, the gas tank under the recall. So it's got a nice new gas tank in it. Well, it's probably 5-6 years old now, but as you can see, we got new gas, all new gas lines in there. I got to do some wire maintenance, zip up some wires, but I did have to replace my MPEM. That's why all these wires are down. My MPEM went bad. Got a new MPEM from West Side, or used MPEM from West Side Power Sports, I believe. I got that from him. But this machine hasn't gotten the complete thorough GC Extreme restoration because it's been a reliable machine. But eventually, if this engine ever needs to be rebuilding, the engine's going to come out, the tank's going to come out, this thing's going to get all washed up, and we're going to paint the inside with that bilge paint, and it'll get a full restoration with all new water lines and everything else when that day comes. I haven't even had to do the Welch plug on it. It hasn't leaked. So like I said, overall this machine's been a good machine. It's probably got 230 hours on this engine, so it's got to be getting up to the point where it's going to need a rebuild. But it's been, of all my machines, this machine's been the most reliable. Like I said, other than a broken throttle cable and a few issues with the rectifier, but it's been the most reliable. That's why it's got so many hours on it. So for the conversion, here's what we need. You're going to need your pump spacer from a 95 XP. There's a lot of them out there. Most of them are the white and yellow with the 717s. So basically, if you have a 717 XP hull that you're parting out or getting rid of, you basically need everything from it. You're going to need your studs off the back, the longer studs. You're going to need your longer trim rod. You're going to need your shaft, your drive shaft. Here we have brand new nice drive shaft. And one of the most expensive thing other than the drive shaft is going to be your steering cable, because you need a longer steering cable because it's going to stick out a few inches longer. So I will put all the part numbers for these that you can get new. I think this steering cable and the drive shaft I got from sbt.com. So these are going to be the hardest to find if you can't get them out of a hole, out of a parts hole. They're going to be the hardest to find. Can't get them really new, but you can probably rig something up with different studs because they need to be longer to go through this. Of course, you're going to need your other basic tools. We got our 10s and 8s and our sockets and stuff. You're going to need some auto marine sealant, razor blade. Because I think the hardest part of this, other than having to rebuild the pump, is going to be swapping out that cable, that steering cable. That is going to be the hardest. Now, since we are adding link to this, I'm not sure if this step ladder here is going to stick out, if it's going to be in the way of the nozzle. Because on the 95 one that I got, these are a little higher, so I may have to order another ladder to stick out. But if that's the case, I will just take this off. It's easy, 1 bolt, and that the ladder will come off and the spring mechanisms will stay on. But you probably don't have this on your ski, so you don't have to worry about that. But these are the basic tools you're going to need for this. Of course, if you are rebuilding your pump, you're going to need more tools, wear ring, and all that stuff. I don't have the carrier bearing out here. It's still in a box. I believe this is the carrier bearing box, and this is from OSD Marine. So we've got stuff to rebuild our pump in there. So I will get that done today. But I'm only going to record and show the conversion. The pump rebuild, I've covered that many times. Cutting out the old bearer ring after you remove the impeller, and doing the cone and oil, all that stuff. So it's a lot of work. But if you're just swapping, the key thing is your pump is going to have the plastic ones of these sticking out the pump. This is a pump off a 95. So you're going to need to also order these O-rings. So this is going to butt up to that. It's going to butt up to the spacer. Otherwise, on the 96 and other ones, you don't have these O-rings. You just have the plastic. You have the plastic ones of these. These are the aluminum better upgrade ones. They just stick out like that. And then you put silicone around them. So I'm going to get it set up and we're going to get started, guys. So stay tuned. Okay, so our first step is going to be unhooking stuff back here. Most of these are pretty similar. You're going to need 10 millimeter socket or wrenches here and up in here, and either an 8 here or a Phillips head. Some of these have Phillips head. As you can see, the one over there, I'll show you in a minute, came with a Phillips head. But it's pretty self-explanatory. Then you have a boot back here for your VTS. You either have hose clamps, metal hose clamps for those. I grab my flashlight. There we go. You can see these. This has been the updated, so it's got the plastic clamps with the new boot. Your old style may have metal hose clamps. Those metal hose clamps can dig into the boot and destroy the boot, and then that lets water into your VTS unit and destroys your VTS unit. So that's kind of where we are. We're going to take stuff off of here. As you can see, I don't have my speedometer. I've got a ride plate filler here. And I got the speedometer up there, the wire thing plugged. So let's get busy taking this off. This is a really tight area, so I may be in the way and you may not be able to see very much. But it's pretty easy to do. Let's see, that's a 10. So first we're going to use our 8. I've had this off plenty of time. We're going to unhook our trim. Now, yeah, that was pretty tight since I put that on. We may just pull it off with the nozzle. Okay, and now we'll switch over to our 10 millimeter. Okay, so we got that part done. Now we want to disconnect this. That's our steering cable. Now we will have to take all this off because I think we got to feed the nozzle, the cable through that way when we remove the cable. Now, one tool I didn't grab was my 13. I'm going to grab my 13 socket so we can take the nozzle all off. Let me go grab that. Okay, so I got my 13. Now, there's 2 little O-rings behind this. Right here. You don't want to lose these things. We'll take our bolts and stick our bolts back into our holes. And set that aside. Now, let's see if we can inspect that wear ring. We were having propulsion issues before. We've got a black OEM wear ring, which I replaced many years ago. And it looks like we've got somewhere, not much, but enough to cause some issues on propulsion taking off. So now before we undo, these are 17s for the nuts. Before we undo those, we have to undo our carbon seal pin inside. And we'll do that in just a minute. I'm going to go ahead and take off this rubber boot. Just use our flathead screwdriver to break that free. There we go. The front one is, smaller one is on the front, and there's a bigger one on the back. There we go. Get in there with both hands. There we go. Big one is off. Now we can pull that boot off. We're going to inspect our boot. It looks good. Not bad for probably 9 years of use since I would say probably 8 years of use since I replaced it in 2015 or 2006. I think it was 2016 I replaced it. I bought it in 2015. I don't think I did the pump until probably 2016 or 2017. So it's been 6 or 7 years since the pump's been redone. As far as that stuff's been done. So that's why it's time to replace the wear ring and do the cone oil. So we don't have to take apart the trim. I don't even know why I took that off. But I want to inspect the boot anyway. So we're good. We'll clean this all up. But yeah, the trim doesn't have to come out. So I really technically didn't have to remove that. But I wanted to inspect my boot anyway. So before we unbolt the pump itself and pry that sucker off, we're going to go inside and unhook the pin, the retainer pin clip from the carrier or the carbon seal. So let's do that. Okay, so I'm going to have to remove the PTO cover. You'll see more of the of my bilge pump set up here in a second. I may need to get my side cutter to cut off some zip ties. But we got these plastic thumb screws here to take off for the PTO cover. Let's see, was there a washer? Yep, there's a washer. No, there wasn't. Okay, so I'm gonna pull that out, and you can see my little rigged up little metal strapping. So do our best to get this out of the way and take this PTO cover off. It's hard to do this with one hand. What am I catching? There we go. Okay. I'm going to grease the PTO. And then there is the beautiful carbon seal. We're going to remove this carbon seal. And replace it with a carrier bearing. So now this is why you want to leave your pump on, because you're going to have to push this boot back. Try to do it with my one hand here. You're going to try to pull that back, separate this here from that. They make a special tool, but you need to move this toward the back. There's a retainer ring. It's either a C-clip or an O-ring that keeps that into place. So let's see if I can. Okay, this has the O-ring. Okay, you can see the O-ring sticking out right there. O-rings are a lot nicer, but they're easy to. You got to get something that's sharp and kind of get it out of the groove. It sits in a groove. So I'm going to work on getting that out. Give me a second. Okay, I used a sharp, just used a nail to get in there underneath it. And there is the O-ring. O-ring is loose and spinning right here, as you can see. And then there's the groove it sits in. It's hard to see the shadow, but now we can push this forward. There we go. Okay, so now in order to get this drive shaft out, it's being still clamped on by this clamp here. I'm going to undo both of these clamps with a side cutter, and we'll get that off. That way the drive shaft will come out. So basically you want to keep the pump in there to keep pressure on it. Otherwise, if you push this you won't have enough strength to push stuff that way. It can be a pain without the pump in, because then the drive shaft and stuff wants to move on you. So let me get my side cutter and we'll get that off. Okay, so add a side cutter, unless you have the special tool to remove this, to your list of tools needed for this job. And so it's really hard for me to do this with one hand, but there we go. You want to get up underneath the one lip. Now I may have to turn the engine, turn the PTO to get to the other one, but it's hard to get at. Let's see if we can get to it right here. Probably not. Anyway, I'm going to work on that. I'm going to pause this video and work on getting that off. Okay, so finally got it off. So now that boot's going to come off. We can inspect that boot, maybe replace it. I've got some spares of those if it needs replacing. But now we're good to remove the pump, and so that drive shaft can come out. So let's get up underneath there and get that out. Okay, so for this, we're going to need our 17 socket for these big bolts, or the big nuts, right up in here. You got 4 of them. Whoops. Looks like I need to replace my drain plug too. I got extra ones of those. Okay. Now this is going to be a pain to remove. I've got a special board set up I use for this. I'll get those washers and nuts off, or washers and lock washers off in a second. But we got our nuts. So now I'm going to grab my board set up and we'll get this pump off of here. Okay, so here I've made this special board with a big hole cut out in it for the cone. And I made it perfect just, so this one will work great because I got the step ladder to help brace it. But if you don't have the step ladder and some other ones, it'll go up against here and then your cone gets in the way. So that's why I cut that big hole out. Basically just 2 2x4s screwed together. Simple pump removal tool. The key here is you want to find a ratchet strap that has a short lead. The shorter one of these, the better. Otherwise, you're going to be too long. And I had a perfect one before, but I cannot find it. So hopefully this one will work. This is about the shortest I got. You want to fit that in there. And this has got the brass pump, so it's pretty strong. If you have the plastic one with the plastic splines, hopefully you don't damage it when you're pulling it out. But with the brass ones, it's a lot easier. Now, one other thing I haven't done yet is unhook my hose, which I just realized we're going to get underneath there and unhook our hoses. I'll show you what hoses I need to unhook. So we get up in here, we got to unhook our supply line hose. That's that hose there, and our 2 bailers. And that's those 2 kind of yellowish lines right there. So we'll get up underneath there and unhook those. I may have to remove the VTS unit after all, just to make it easier to get to those hoses. So I'm going to remove those and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. Okay, so I went ahead and removed my VTS unit, pull it out. So now you can see these 2 lines here and then the main hose for the water right there. So we need those two lines there, and then that one there with the hose clamp. We'll take those off. And if you ever need to remove your VTS unit, get yourself a piece of pipe, plastic pipe. I think this is a 1.5 inch or whatnot. I can't exactly remember. Heat up the end, and then push on over the nut so it'll mold to the nut. Let it cool, and then you can drill a hole through that, stick a screwdriver, and twist it off. It works really great. Works really great for removing your VTS nut. So I've made several of those because I always lose them or they get thrown away or broken or something. I don't know. But we're going to get these hoses off, and then we're going to pull that pump off. So I'll take those off real quick, and then we'll get back to that pump. So we got those lines unhooked. You can see them right there. And the other hose is unhooked, laying right there with the hose clamp. So all three fittings for the hoses are off. Now we can come back off here and get started on our pump. Okay, so seeing me do this in other videos, not rocket science, but they can be a pain, and my board is wanting to curl. This thing is a pain. Trying to get in the right spot. Wants to, yeah, the board wants to just spin around. Yep, okay, let's try something else. It's been a while since I've done this. Let's put it right here on the bunks for the cart. And we're going to bring the ski toward us a little bit. Hopefully eventually we'll get to a point where it'll stop. And problem after problem. I can hear it wanting to break free. There we go. There we go. We're making progress. There we go. Now get some slack and get this off of there. Okay. Unhook our ratchet strap. And she comes out. She's all out. Now we'll have to take this out of the impeller. That should, with some elbow grease and whatnot, it should work its way out. Okay. It wants to come out, but okay, so these here will get taken off, and we'll put the O-rings in here that we need in here. And then we'll put these, you can either put these into your pump spacer or you can get the aluminum ones. I recommend the aluminum ones, as these plastic ones like to break off. And we'll get this wear ring cut out, get this pump rebuilt. We'll get this pump rebuilt, and then we'll start doing our conversion. Now we'll need to clean up in here. We'll need to clean up all this silicone, all this stuff. And then we have the chore of removing these studs. Basically, what we do for the studs is we use the 2-nut method. You put the nut on there. I'll have to get some 17-inch wrenches. Put the 2 nuts on there, jam them together, and then hopefully you can break them free. Without breaking the studs themselves, of course. So, you want to... I'll have to get a wrench and tighten them up, and then get my other 2 17mm wrenches, and hopefully you can turn it out. Put the new studs in. You're going to want some either blue or red Loctite, if that's your choice. But we'll get to get all this stuff cleaned up for new silicones. So we got a lot of work ahead of me. I'm not going to record all this, but then we'll take off and swap out the steering cable. So that'll be a chore. Okay, so what you want to do is hold the back nut with your wrench and then tighten the front one against it. Okay, so once you get that tightened, I already cracked this one loose, but the stud should come out. Let's see if we can do it this way. There we go, look at that. Okay, so now we want to break those 2 nuts free and do the same for the other ones. I'm going to put my wrench on this. Try to break these free. There we go. Got them free. Just like that. Show you guys one more time, and then I will do the other ones off screen. But this is the 2-nut method. We'll see how hard this one's going to be to get off. Crack it free. Let's see if it'll move. Oh, yep, there we go. Now, if you can get your socket back on there through both of them, that's great, but sometimes you can't because they're not lined up right. But let's see. Let's see if this one will come out as easy as the other one will. There we go. So we just repeat that for the bottom ones. Now, if you have these spacers, these little shims, that's to make sure your pump is aligned and everything. So kind of keep them where they're at. If you have an alignment tool, you can check your alignment tool with your engine and everything else. But since this is stock and for the most part it's never been removed, we're going to leave them as they are because we're using the same pump. We're just going to rebuild it. So I'll get these other nuts, other studs off, and then I'm going to work on rebuilding that pump, getting the old wear ring out. Okay, guys, so I got all the studs out of there, and we're working on removing the steering cable. Of course, removing the trim housing helps a lot with that, as well as undoing the screws for the battery box so you can move the battery box back, because you've got to get in there to get to that. See that blue cable? The blue cable there with the nut, that is a 19, you need a 19 millimeter wrench to get to that. A 19 millimeter wrench, probably one that's not as long, because you don't have much room in there to turn it once it hits the side. But loosening up the battery box to removing the battery box, or at least push it forward like I did to get it out of the way, helps. So we got that nut to remove. I got it finger tight, or I got it where I can get it out with my fingers. And I think it'll go out the back, because as you tighten this, it will draw that rear seal right there. That comes in parts and pieces. Make sure you don't lose any pieces of that. But you still got to disconnect your cable mechanisms up in here, and this is going to be a pain. You've got the 210s, that's 10 millimeter wrench to get those off, and then the one on this connecting rod right there. So once you get that off, you should, and you may have to take the ends off too, the spindles, in order to feed that cable all the way through. Now, the new cable didn't come with any hardware. I mean, this was like a $200 cable. Didn't come with any nuts or the spindles. So we got to reuse those. And they like to break, just don't over tighten it, because these like to break. They're so thin. So we'll undo these ends, and we'll reuse them on the new one. So I'm going to work on getting that off, and I'm pretty sure I have to feed everything through there, and the nuts and stuff will come off. So when you feed stuff back through, you want to put the nuts in as you feed it through, because you don't want to feed it all the way through and then have to feed your nuts down the whole shaft or the whole cable. So I'm going to work on getting that off. And said I can't really record me undoing these, but it's just some 10 millimeter wrench and get those nuts and stuff off. I can't get the camera up in there. But that'll be the cable. Pretty self-explanatory. You want to leave some stuff loose. Once you get the nozzle on, you'll want to dial it in so it's straight and handlebars are straight. And that's the point where you don't want to over tighten stuff on those spindles, on these turnbuckles or whatever you want to call them. I ran into an issue rebuilding my pump. I got the old wear ring out, got the new wear ring in. This is a Durlin wear ring from OSD Marine. But I'm going to go ahead and replace my shaft and these bearings. And so I ordered a new kit from him. Today's Monday, Memorial Day. Hopefully he'll get that out tomorrow, and I'll get it in for next weekend. But then I'm going to take these off, go ahead and take these off, and get my O-rings put in for those. So hopefully we'll be good for there. I've got a mess in here, so turn that light off. I got a mess. This is a project, but it's I mean it's pretty simple, guys. Remove the pump, remove your studs, remove the trim, then pull out your steering cable, and you'll be replacing everything with these. Here is that longer VTS trim rod. This one actually has a Phillips head, but it doesn't matter. It's still the same screw. As you can see, it is quite a bit longer than the original 96 XP one. So So that's one thing you'll need for this conversion. So like I said before, that extension, the new studs, longer studs. This, you may want to use these aluminum fittings instead of going with the plastic ones, because these like to warp and break. Your steering cable. Here we have our carrier bearing. Nice package from OSD Marine. We'll slip that on, and with this, you don't have to worry about that O-ring or C-clip on the shaft. See what I do with that shaft. Yes, here's the old shaft. You can see that groove. These are your bumper boots at both ends. I've got new ones I'm going to throw on. You can probably reuse your old ones if you want. And as you can see, our shaft, our new shaft is a few inches longer. So we drained oil out of our pump. We used our Dremel tool with a cutting bit to pry that out, along with a flathead screwdriver and a hammer. The old one came out. I already threw it in the garbage, but just so you know, that don't take but a few minutes to do. Put some RTV silicone on the base as you hammer the new one in. So we're going to replace these bearings and this shaft. Hard to do this with one hand. There we go. Shaft is pretty worn. And I cleaned it with some carb cleaner and cleaned out the bearings, but I'm going to go on the side of safety and precautious and just push these old ones out. I don't like to use a new shaft with old bearings. So we'll get that swapped out when those parts come in. And we'll be ready to go. Okay, so got the other plastic piece in. Grab my flashlight. As you can see, I got it on. And I had to take those boots off again to get that on. So just remember, all this stuff you got to put on. Just go ahead and take those rubber boots off until you get everything else put on. That plastic piece there that spins into the housing right there, you can't get that on with the rubber boot on. So we got it shoved up in there. So we got our threads right there. We'll get our nut onto those threads in there and get that tightened up. Where is my flashlight? There it is. Okay. So there is all these hoses in the way. We'll get this started. You can dab some silicone around behind that washer too. I'll probably do that after I get it snug, and just that'll keep it from getting water coming in through there, from leaking. But you want to get it as good as you can with your finger. So it's somewhat in place. We'll get a wrench in there and get it tight and dab some silicone, RTV marine silicone around it. So that'll be tight because that secures that here up against the hull once we tighten it. And forms a nice good seal on this side. So So that's kind of the hardest part, is just the steering cable. And it is a pain to get up in here to remove this, remove that 10 millimeter bolt and nut, unless you're ambidextrous and really flexible to get up in there with both shoulder, hands, and arms, and up in there. It's a pain. The Milwaukee 90-degree helps a lot, but putting it back in is going to be even harder. So steering cable is pretty much mostly in. I may just throw this pump on it for now, because like I said, doing this spacer makes it a lot easier to swap out pumps. You don't have to redo all that silicone all the time. But for now, I'm gonna have to work on getting all that silicone and all that cleaned up before I put the spacer in there. So this will be the end of part 1 of this conversion. Basically got everything off, got the new steering cable ran through, got to remove all the silicone off the back, get ready for the new studs and the spacer. And then it's just putting the pump and stuff back on, connecting everything back up. Pretty easy conversion overall. Just make sure you buy the right parts, have the right tools ready. I had to make a lot of trips back and forth to get some tools I didn't have ready. But 13 millimeter wrenches, 10 millimeters, maybe an 8s, sockets as well in those. If you're doing the pump, you're going to need a 17 and 19 as well. And just, I've covered some of these stuff with the pumps in previous videos, but this conversion is going to make it a lot easier to swap the pumps out if I want to go from different pumps with different impellers in them. Because I have several different pumps already built up with different impellers with different pitches and stuff in them to try different things pretty fast. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Shout out to OSD Marine, Nick Grillo at OSD Marine for all of his parts he's provided. Also a shout out to Nick Carnes at Westside Power Sports for the parts he's provided for this ski in the past and my current projects that I'm working on. And hopefully we'll get this back on the water and get it cleaned up, get some fresh registration decals on it, and maybe a new side decal for Punisher here. But like I said, this has been a really good, pretty reliable ski. Doing this performance, this little conversion, just I can swap out pumps between this and my other ones pretty easy. But this has been a great ski, pretty reliable. Just general maintenance stuff. First ski I ever bought. Probably don't think I will ever sell this one. But when that engine blows, it's time for have it rebuilt. Everything's going to get gutted, and it's going to get the special treatment that my other one, my 95 XP 951 has, with the painted inside and all that stuff. Probably repowder coat the pipes. But yeah, I want to keep as much of the stock engine as possible. But may swap out Westside Power Sports steering system on it as well. Who knows? We'll see what happens in the future. But hope you guys have enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.
Thanks for watching this video. Please hit the like button and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.